Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighborville, the third installment in the PvZ shooters, in a game that had a lot of mixed reviews because they completely changed most of the things that made Garden Warfare 1 and Garden Warfare 2 special. But there was one thing that Battle for Neighborville did better than the previous two, and that was its campaign, having 4 different maps to explore with 4 different stories and 4 main bosses at the end. So today I'll be playing every main story and defeating every single boss to see just how good it was. Oh, and quickly, about 82% of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, so if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Okay, let's begin. To start off, we first talk to Vivian, a nightcap, and after we hop into Penny, who launches off into the distance and brings us to the Sundrop Hills part of Town Center. And Town Center is the name of the very first map that we're going to tackle. So first we run straight to Major Sweetie, who is sort of the main plant that directs us in Town Center. And after talking to her, we initiate Boogie Beatdown, which is the mainline quest. And the quest first directs us to enter the Thunderdome and take out Old School, but on my way there I ran into this trapped Snapdragon, so I helped it out, afterwards sprinting straight to the Thunderdome tunnels. But it appeared there was actually a bodyguard guarding the door that we're supposed to enter, and it didn't allow us entry since we were uncool and unzombie. And learning this news, we get another message from Major Sweetie telling us to come back to base to think of a new plan. But right after I got out of the tunnels, we run into this lawnmower that's kind of being terrorized by the zombies, and this is where our first mini quest begins, as we have to start escorting this lawnmower back to Major Sweetie. On our way back, of course, we run into some annoying zombies trying to take out the lawnmower, and also another plant that was trapped in a bubble, so I took out the bubble, freeing the chomper. And after hunting down several more zombies, we had brought the lawnmower all the way back to Major Sweetie, completing our very first quest. But right after is where Major Sweetie told us the plan to get into that door, and simply put, that lawnmower that we just brought back was basically a bomb, and we would need to use it to blow up that bouncer guarding the door. But the lawnmower itself is too easy to identify, so we have to collect 3 different pieces to make a disguise for the lawnmower, making it into a mind blower. And this was where our very first main quest started, named the Baron Palooza quest initiates after talking to Corny Corn, and we're tasked to find Baron Von Bats in the sewers and try to defeat him. But as soon as we enter the sewers, a cutscene starts where all the ways out are shut off, and Baron Von Bats appears rising from the dead. And we're plunged straight into a fight with it, and you can see that this time I chose to use Snapdragon because I just remember it being one of the better characters when the game first came out. Its normal attack is perfect for the story mode as it does decent damage and pierces through all the enemies. And for the tankier enemies, we have its abilities, which you'll see later. And at first in this quest, we have to survive in this area from a curse, and there was more that happened right after, but my footage skips 5 minutes ahead as I accidentally paused, and this was due to the reason that one of my binds for my abilities was the same as my pause button on my recording. But don't worry, not too much was missed. It was basically another small fight with Baron Von Bats, but he escapes again. And right here again, we have to survive the curse using this thing in the middle called the Bat Zapper, and it's called the Bat Zapper because it zaps the curse that's on us, which is basically the bats from Baron Von Bats. And if I was using any other plant that wasn't Snapdragon, this part would have been pretty scary because the game just kept on sending infinite exploding imps. And I should quickly mention that you can see my health in the bottom left going over the maximum amount, and that was due to the power-ups that I chose for the Snapdragon, because if you remember, in this game instead of variants they had power-ups. And I won't mention them too much, but the main thing to remember is that for every plant or zombie that I used in this entire challenge, I almost always ended up picking the health power-ups because they just seemed to work the best in the story mode. And talking about the story mode, we had one last obstacle before we reached Baron Von Bats, and that was taking out this champion Super Brains, who was definitely very tanky, but one of our high damage abilities took his health down a significant amount and we were able to defeat it. And after jumping over this fence, we entered the concert of Baron Von Bats and initiated the mini boss battle. And this boss battle consisted of hordes of zombies, and at the same time we had to damage Baron Von Bats, but after a certain amount of damage dealt, Baron Von Bats would just teleport to a different spot. But as soon as he'd reappear, I'd just spam my abilities at him, taking his health down bit by bit. And there were a couple of moments where I got a little worried because he kept on blitzing my health down, but as he had a sliver of health left, I used my last ability and took him out. And with that, we had defeated Baron Palooza and obtained the cool hat. And the next mini quest we face is The I Treasure You quest initiates after talking to this acorn named Tenderleaf, who tells us how to get the bling piece, but also mentions that his friends got lost and to help him find him. And of course, in spirit of the mission, I used acorn myself and ran straight to his first missing squad member. And the squad member was trapped in a bubble, but this time there wasn't a machine creating the bubble, so we had to go and find it. But running around, a cutscene got initiated revealing the Yeti, which was the mini boss of this quest. After the reveal, Tenderleaf told us the Yeti has the control pad that's making the bubble. So dealing a little bit of damage to the Yeti, it was revealed that Tenderleaf was correct and we got the control pad, which then we're able to destroy and rescue the squad member. But we weren't done here yet, as we still had to defend this acorn from the oncoming zombies. And it was getting a little hectic, so I transformed into the oak. And this is a transformation of the oak, which is a lot tankier and deals more damage. Even cooler, in multiplayer, 3 other acorn can jump on top of your head, teaming up with you, providing you with healing. And I don't really get to show this off in the story mode since I'm not playing with any other people, but this was definitely one of the cooler things added into this game. And even cooler, the zombies have their own version of this. It's called the Space Cadet, who we use later. But that aside, we had now made it to the second acorn trapped in the bubble, and chasing after the Yeti while dealing damage, we eventually were able to get the second control pad, freeing this acorn as well. And now we only had one more acorn left to find. And the next step of this quest was me basically following this acorn to dig sites to try to find this thing called a shiny lure, but he kept taking me to the wrong ones. But eventually, after many attempts, we did find it, which ended up just being a boot. And the shiny lure was basically a contraption that we had to use to lure out the Yeti. And this lure also made it to where the Yeti couldn't hide away anymore. And of course, it was now time to deal damage, so I transformed into the oak, spamming my abilities whenever I got the chance. And dealing enough damage to the Yeti, we got access to save the third acorn and had to do a mini side quest of taking it all the way back to Tenderleaf. And once we got back, it actually initiated a pretty cool cutscene where the Yeti just plopped down from the sky and the acorns all being back together, combined together, making this insane oak. And wasting literally 0 time, they started charging the Yeti, and for some reason not using any attacks, but instead focusing on their music, just started yelling at the Yeti. I was definitely a non-believer in this working, but somehow eventually it worked and the Yeti just disappeared, dropping his bling. And that was that quest. We completed I Treasure You and got the cool bling. And next up, we faced the final quest before the final boss, which is named... The quest starts off with us first talking to this chomper named Landfill, and then using the corn as my character for this quest, we sprint to a place called the Uno Taco. And in my opinion, the corn definitely has the goofiest running animation out of all the characters. Something just feels off. But that aside, once we reached the Uno Taco, we had to defeat some zombies guarding the area, and I got pretty close to death a couple of times, but with the help of some of the abilities that I selected, we're able to regenerate and make it through. Afterwards, running up top of Uno Taco into Zen Sensei, and when I approached him, he kind of just pushed me back, and then I realized that I actually hadn't defeated all of the zombies yet, so I went looking around until I finally found this zombie hiding up top. And after shooting his feet and taking it out, the Zen Sensei cutscene activated, and Landfill gave us the orders to defeat him. But Zen Sensei was definitely the scariest of the bosses because he kept teleporting and just sprinting directly at me. But thankfully I had chosen the corn, who has the Husk Hop ability, and I'm able to get away pretty quickly. Also, I was making use of this truck whenever I got low on health, and after I used one of my Husk Hop abilities, I got the Zen Sensei's health down that initiated the next phase. And in this phase, Zen Sensei can't be hurt because he's meditating and his inner peace makes him invincible. But there is a way to disrupt his inner peace with first us preparing some defenses, and then using a taunt in the circle, which infuriates the Zen Sensei, and he starts sending in hordes of his clones. And our goal is to keep the clones away from the door of the Uno Taco, which is right underneath us. And the ones approaching from the left were pretty easily taken care of, so then they started attacking from the right side, which was definitely more annoying of an angle, and so I hadn't realized, and one actually got really close and ended up making it past the door. So I decided that it'd be better if I just stayed down here to make sure that that didn't happen again. But after I defeated them, I went back up top because I knew it was time to fight Zen Sensei. And as soon as he stopped meditating, I started shooting my corn. But then he just disappeared into thin air, so I kind of freaked out and husk-hopped to the other building. And this ended up being a good move because I caught him going up top the Uno Taco. And since most of his attacks are short range attacks, he couldn't really reach here. And even the attack that he did have that was long range wasn't too deadly, and we pretty easily regenerated the health. But eventually I dealt enough damage that Zen Sensei started meditating once again. And this was the same exact thing where we had to defend the Uno Taco from the clones, but this time in the midst of the clones there was also a Gargantuar sent. And the Gargantuar isn't too deadly when it comes to its damage, and the main problem was its health. It was just taking so long to destroy that the other clones kept on getting closer and closer, and one even ended up making it into the Uno Taco, but soon after I was able to take out the Gargantuar, which made beating the rest of the clones very easy. And eventually we broke Zen Sensei's meditation, and as soon as he's about to teleport, I again husk-hopped to the other building, but this time he actually just teleported right behind me, which definitely spooked me a little bit, but I just ran up top the Uno Taco. But then he started following me to there as well, so I jumped and sprinted to the other building again, and the Super Brains came after me, but I was able to use my power and take him out pretty easily. And getting an opportunity, I placed a Scaredy Shroom inside this pot to help me deal damage to Zen Sensei, but I'm not gonna lie, it basically did nothing as it just stayed hidden, and this wasn't too big of a deal as Zen Sensei was getting pretty low. And right here I thought that I defeated him, so I stopped shooting, but this wasn't the case because Zen Sensei just teleported to the right of me, kicking me off the building. So I just sprinted up to the other building and then shot at him, defeating him this time, throwing us into a cutscene in front of the Uno Taco and Zen Sensei disappearing, leaving his goatee behind. And with that, we had completed the fight Zentrification quest and unlocked the cool goatee, but now we face Old School is of course the boss that I mentioned at the beginning of entering Town Center, but before we get to him, we still have to make use of the Mind Blower. And in order to do this, I first changed into the Citron, who I'll be using for this boss fight, and set a waypoint to the Mind Blower. And after accessing the control panel for it, we're able to drive the Mind Blower. And our goal here is to drive the Mind Blower right into the bouncer that's guarding the door and then blow it up. And it was getting pretty close as my energy was already halfway out, but thankfully we're able to make it to the bouncer and then just blow it up in his face, leaving the door wide open. So of course, going back to the Citron, we started rolling over to the sewers once again, and this time when we got to the gate, there was no bouncer guarding it, and we entered the boss stage. And as the door opened, our Citron walked right in, but as it walked in, the door behind shut, meaning there was no escape. And there's a little bit of a hint as you're entering the boss right here where we have to destroy these lit up tiles, and you'll see what I mean. But for now, we activate this red button and the platform beneath us starts going upwards, and we're brought up into the middle of this battle arena with the disco ball appearing seconds later. And this wasn't just any disco ball because it opened up, and inside the disco ball we finally got to see Old School. He rocked an insane afro and was showing off some of his music skills, and after his name came up in a pretty cool fashion, we engaged in battle. And it started off with me just attacking him using my most basic attack and him shooting his rockets at me, but then I used one of my abilities which did some pretty insane damage, but in the midst of it I got hit by one of the rockets which forced me to start breakdancing. And this breakdancing was actually pretty detrimental because Old School shot CDs at us that ended up hitting me, so I knew I was gonna have to run around a little bit to get some of my health back. And from the last rocket shot, I'd realized that I can actually shoot them, so this time I made sure that none of them survived. And with this knowledge, we're pretty easily able to evade his attacks and deal damage at the same time, which eventually made him pretty angry, so he shut close his disco ball and started stomping on the arena. And the stomping sent shockwaves, which if I got hit, did a pretty significant amount of damage. So I was making sure to dodge them, but I was definitely mistiming some of them. And eventually Old School stopped doing the shockwaves and just started spinning in place. And this was the preparation for an attack where he just charges right at you. And I'd actually forgotten, but you're actually supposed to make use of this attack that he does to take out one of the speakers that's behind me. So the next time he did a spin attack, I stood right in front of the speaker, and right as he was about to charge, I moved away, which took out one of the speakers, and Old School came out of the ball. And this led to another phase, which was basically the same as the first, where he shoots his rockets and sends the spinning discs. And eventually we deal enough damage that he goes back in his ball. And I didn't mention it last time, but if you look at his health bar in the top, you can see that it's closed, meaning that he's invulnerable in this state. So we're forced to dodge all of his attacks without having any way to deal damage to him. And this time, after he was done with the shockwaves, he didn't do a spinning attack, but instead pulled out this move. And this was a little preview I was talking about while entering the battle arena, because we had to destroy these lit up tiles, because otherwise we just get hit by the tiles and take a pretty significant amount of damage. And it wasn't just dodging that we had to do, we also had to attack Old School at the same time. So if you're fighting him for the first time, this part can be a little difficult, but like I mentioned earlier, I had played this game before and done this boss fight as well. So I was familiar with most of the things that Old School did, and it was exactly the reason why I brought in Citron, because I knew his basic attack was pretty good at destroying the tiles. And then I also had his laser ability to deal insane amounts of damage to Old School himself. And again, after we dealt enough damage, Old School went back into his disco ball and started creating shockwaves and also starting up the tile ability again. But I'm not gonna lie, this time I realized that if I just keep shooting at him and going right in the direction that the tiles were going, even if I did end up taking damage, by the time I was about to get hit next, I'd regain my health. And this was a pretty cool find because it guaranteed that I couldn't die to this stage. And using this strategy, Old School was getting pretty low on health, and eventually using my most normal attack, we defeated Old School, which caused the disco ball to malfunction and go up into the sky and shatter into a million pieces. And that had meant that we defeated the main storyline quest of Town Center and beat Old School. And so going back to Major Sweetie, she tells us how she's overjoyed and that we deserve a free hug coupon book. But of course, this wasn't the end, as we still had 3 more maps to go, and next up we go to the zombie side. On the zombie side, we talked to this guy named Sebastian, and he tells us about this place named Weirding Woods and how there's this invasive plant named Dreadwood that's kind of controlling the area. So he offers us a ride on his submarine so we can check it out. And arriving at Camp Near Lake in the Weirding Woods, you can see that some trees kind of just pop up out of nowhere, solidifying the name Weirding Woods and foreshadowing something even more ominous. And unlike Town Center on the plant side, on the Weirding Woods we actually don't land in the mission hub, so we have to take a little journey defeating some plants on the way there, and we also see trees just keep popping out of nowhere. You can see this one definitely caught me off guard a little bit, but either way I kept going forward and ran into the squash that was guarding this bridge, and I have to get past this bridge, so I started shooting at it. It was very slow, so I was actually able to get its health down a significant amount before it made it anywhere near me, and even when it was getting close I could just back off and gain some distance. And I know I'm not supposed to be feeling bad for the plants as a zombie, but this squash definitely had a gruesome death. But anyways, I made it across the bridge and entered this area between these gigantic rocks, running into an all-star who was named Cletus, but we'll come back to him later, because for now we made it to this very destroyed area, and as soon as I jumped in the swamp looking thing, something spawned behind me, and after attacking it I realized I was doing no damage, so I kind of just had to back off, entering an area that had graffiti of some sort of dummy all over it. And after talking to the zombie named Tim, he tells us to stay back because he doesn't want to catch our smartness, but this also initiates our very first quest in the Weirding Woods. This quest is a pretty basic one, as it asks us to defeat that thing that we ran into earlier, and we learned that it's called the Dread Root. And shooting at the Dread Root, you can see that I was hitting it at some parts where I dealt normal damage instead of the shielded damage, but I never really figured out exactly where that damage point was, but thankfully whenever I shot my rocket it always dealt normal damage, and slowly but surely I was able to dwindle down its health, taking it out, completing the root of the problem quest. And us defeating this one Dread Root gave Tim hope that we could defeat Dreadwood itself. And you're gonna notice a pattern in every single world that's similar to the one in Town Center, where we have to do 3 mini quests collecting 3 different items, and then we get to fight the final boss. And the same went for the Weirding Woods as well, and this time it was a boombox that we had to fix to put Dreadwood to sleep. And our first quest was... This quest starts off with us talking to this dude named Huge Devotee, and he explains to us how he's a huge fan of this all-star dummy, even saying that he's a bigger follower of the dummy than he is of Zomboss. Definitely an interesting zombie. But that aside, we're put into this dreamlike state, and the dummy asks us what the dumbest animal is, and apparently we say goat, so it transforms us into a goat, afterwards asking us to follow it, eventually reaching the stack of books which it asks us to destroy because we don't like knowledge around here. Shout out Fahrenheit 451. And eventually we go outside the building, running into some plants, and the dummy asks us to vanquish the plants because plants are smart and we don't like smartness. So of course we do exactly that, which then the dummy calls me an artist, and I think artist just caught a crazy stray from the dummy. But anyways, dummy transforms into a stack of dummies, which now we have to protect from the oncoming zombies. And so I turn into the Space Cadet space station, and I haven't really mentioned anything about the Space Cadet yet, but basically it's like the acorn that we used in the beginning, where you can team up with other players in this space station. But the space station by itself is pretty good as well, but of course since it's so big its mobility isn't very good, so this nightcap used its ability and just blitzed my health down. So I panic jumped out of the space station, and now my health was even lower, but I just had to make sure that I got rid of this nightcap because that was the thing dealing the most damage to me. And eventually when it came out of its invisibility I was able to defeat it. But defeating the nightcap started the next phase of this challenge, which was the squash. And this squash is the same exact one that we fought in the beginning of the Weirding Woods, but the difference this time is that the squash's main target is the dummies and it completely ignores me, and we just have to make sure that we defeat it before it gets there. And the Space Cadet is one of the better zombies for this because his space station does crazy damage, but there was a problem here because I didn't realize that the squash was going straight for the dummy health at first, so it completely caught me off guard as I hadn't dealt enough damage and it was getting very close. And I tried spamming all of my heavy damage dealing abilities, and just as I was about to take it out, I used my other ability, which takes some time to land, and in that time the squash was able to take out the dummies, which led to my first loss in a quest, forcing me to retry. But of course on the second attempt I had the knowledge of all the plants that I'd be facing, so I was able to pretty easily make it to the same spot, and this time not wasting any time I started rushing over to the squash before it even appeared. And I'm in the space station because this ability that I use on the squash is one of the abilities that does a crazy amount of damage with the Space Cadet, and I think it's one of the heaviest damage dealing abilities in the entire game. So this time we defeated the squash and it didn't even get close, and that was the last enemy that we had to defend the dummies against. And next up, the dummy asked us to come and adore it, and this basically just meant going up to the dummy and holding down F. But then the dummy says to not think of our worst fear, which apparently we think of, and it was a hungry chomper. And even worse, after the chomper appears, we get transformed into a goat once again and are tasked to defeat 3 more towers of books, which was honestly pretty easy, and we transformed back into the Space Cadet right after, and the dummy asked us to come find him for our final exam. And truthfully, this quest had been so weird so far that this final exam could have been anything. And entering into a cutscene, the dummy asked us to think of the dumbest place on Earth, and apparently the dumbest place on Earth was the dummy, so it just started getting bigger and bigger, and eventually we're transported onto an arena on top of the gigantic dummy where we have to vanquish 40 different plants. And the first 30 plants were pretty easy, but then the dummy wanted to show them how dumb we really were and transformed me into a goat once again. So I had to go through defeating the last 10 zombies just using the goat, which eventually we did, and the screen just jumped to this goat telling us that our mind is truly empty and that we're ready to get the sacred batteries. And apparently the sacred batteries were inside us all along, and then the goat just flies off into the distance. And that right there was probably the weirdest quest of this entire challenge, but at least we got the sacred batteries. And the next quest is... This quest starts by talking to Cletus the All-Star, who we'd seen earlier, and for some reason he's crying, which soon the reason revealed is that the dummy that we just helped was Cletus's dummy, and the dummy ditched him to become the cult leader. But that dummy that we had just helped was all in a dream, since the real dummy is still a Dreadwood. And apparently the lullaby tape we need to fix the boombox Cletus had stolen earlier to save dummy, but in that process the lullaby tape got completely messed up, but there was a way to save it. And as we're sprinting to the destination where we get the lullaby tape, I should mention that on this quest I'm going to be using the 80s action hero, who in my opinion is the coolest character that was added to the zombie side, mainly because of his cool abilities like this rocket one that deals a ton of damage, but also just his normal weapon, the energy crossbow, can be shot at a medium pace but also used as a semi-sniper if you charge it up. But enough glazing the character, as we now had to escort this washing machine named Washi. And what we're doing here is basically going through a cycle of how you'd wash your clothes, but Washi seems to have some special powers, and using these special powers can fix the lullaby tape, and all we have to do is just protect it. And in protecting it against this pea shooter, I was unfamiliar with the fact that the pea shooter's beam bomb does an insane amount of damage even in the campaign, so I didn't really pay much attention to it when I launched it, but then it exploded, taking me out even though I had 111 health. And this was my second loss in a quest, so of course I had to restart, but thankfully we hadn't made it too far, meaning we hadn't lost that much progress either. And this time I made sure to stay far away from the pea shooter, eventually making it to the next horde of plants. But then Washi just suddenly stopped, and we're tasked to defeat 3 yodeling acorns, who were just champion acorns with a lot more health, but they didn't attack you and instead just ran away. And these guys' running away ability was definitely annoying, but the 80s action hero's abilities were very helpful, and we eventually were able to defeat him. And after escorting Washi some more, it eventually stopped. But that of course was still just the wash cycle, and now we needed to start the rinse cycle. And this consisted basically of the same exact thing, where we had to defeat hordes of plants and protect Washi. And when I say protect Washi, we're not actually protecting it, since it doesn't have a health bar and can't die. We're more so just trying not to die ourselves. And after a ton of walking, the rinse cycle had finally ended, and now we're starting the last cycle, which was the spin cycle, again being tasked to vanquishing 3 yodeling acorns. But this time it was a little more challenging, as the game threw at us an oak, and it wasn't just one but multiple oaks paired with multiple pea shooters as well. And spamming my abilities, I did eventually defeat all the plants and went back to escorting Washi, where it then just stopped and then rapidly started spinning in place. But Washi does well with words of encouragement, so we held down F to inspire it. And this inspiration made Washi fly out into the distance where Cletus said the tape would be. And once we got there, we got sent into a cutscene where we saw Washi just stuck in the middle of a swamp. And around Washi, we saw circling a dreadroot. And this dreadroot destroyed Washi, taking the lullaby tape from it. RIP Washi in the comment section. But anyways, the game allowed me to get revenge for Washi, putting me in a battle against the dreadroot, and I still couldn't find where the damage point was, but the rocket ability somehow had an effect where every rocket dealt damage that was normal damage. And this was allowing me to destroy the dreadroot very quickly. And eventually, while the dreadroot was underground, my normal attack was able to defeat it, which meant that we had now gotten the lullaby tape, and the Be Kind Rewind quest had been completed, with the last quest being... The zombie prepared quest starts by talking to this Girl Scout imp who tasks us to find her cookies in order to get the last item. And this quest starts off pretty straightforward as we're given a meter up top that tells us whether we're hot or cold to the cookies. And while we make our way towards the cookies, I should mention that for this quest I used Electric Slide. She's also, in my opinion, one of the cooler characters on the zombie side, that has abilities that either push zombies back, throw a thunder tornado that you can detonate at any point, and lastly, she also has the ability that the scientist had in Garden Warfare 2, where you turn into a ball of energy and can move around. And I think her coolest ability is the one that pushes all the zombies back, because there's just a lot of use cases for it. But more importantly, this character's main damage comes from its normal attack. Her abilities aren't very heavy damage dealing, but her normal attack does an insane amount of damage. But all that aside, we had now found the first cookie, which ended up being the wrong cookie because it was chocolate chip, and Izzy the imp was a little angry, calling them basic, so we started skating around looking for the next one, eventually making it to this area in the middle where there was this thing called a sunspot that heals the plants around it. And here we were tasked to vanquish all the nearby enemies, which I did, but then I started looking around for more because the quest hadn't ended, but I couldn't find them. But then I realized that I'm actually supposed to destroy the sunspot itself, which did complete the task. But digging up the next cookie, we realized that isn't the right one, as it's oatmeal raisin and Izzy says it's garbage. So we once again start skating around to the next spot, and now we'd made it to the main mission hub, running into another sunspot that I immediately destroyed, and then all the plants around it as well, to then dig up the last pile of dirt, which sent us into a cutscene. And in this cutscene, we find out that Izzy's cookie wasn't a cookie at all, and actually was a gargantuar named Cookies holding a gigantic bomb, who we were now tasked to guard, as it's going to bring the bomb to the sunflowers that have been annoying us this entire quest. And we pretty easily did this, transitioning into a cutscene where Cookies is taking the bomb down a flight of stairs, but then out of nowhere he feels a rumbling underneath, so he stops and a big tree just wipes him out. And Izzy, being angry at Dreadwood, tells us that now we're the new Cookies and we have to deliver ourselves to the burn site, which I did immediately, taking out all the sunflowers around it. But then we transitioned into another cutscene where out popped a sunflower queen from the ground, who now we had to defeat. And dealing damage to the sunflower queen wasn't too difficult, but after a certain amount of damage dealt, the sunflower queen starts charging up, which then a timer appears right underneath her health, and in that timer we have to take out the sunspots that start spawning around the map. But with each sunspot that gets taken out, there's a certain amount of time that gets added to the timer, and taking out all the sunspots, we deny the solar harvest, again being able to deal damage to the sunflower queen. And this was kind of the cycle of the fight where we damage the sunflower queen, but then sunspots start to spawn, forcing us to destroy them, and after we destroy them, we get to fight the sunflower queen again. And there were some annoying spots where I'd get the sunflower queen's health down, but I would also be low on health, so I'd retreat, but then in my retreat, a sunflower would just start healing the sunflower queen, resetting a decent amount of my progress. And there was a couple of times I almost completely got wiped out and was forced to use the energy ball power to retreat, but eventually I was able to deal enough damage to the sunflower queen and initiate the next cutscene. And you might have noticed there that I actually didn't fully destroy the sunflower queen, and the game throws at us an insane amount of sunspots that would be kind of impossible to take out. But thankfully, as I was destroying the sunspots, the cutscene that I mentioned initiated, which was basically the sunflower queen charging up, but then out of nowhere, Cookies dropped from the sky. But then he looked up, which forced the sunflower queen to look up, and what they were looking up at was the bomb that Cookies had dropping right beside them, which exploded right after. And with that, the zombie prepared quest had been completed, and we obtained the cool stickers. And next we fight Tim tells us that the boombox is now fixed and we have to take it to the radio tower in the stirring swamp to play a sleepy song, which I turn into an imp and go do immediately. And playing the boombox, we can see the sound covers the entirety of the Weirding Woods as we transition to different places and different areas. Also now uncovering this weird door that had a heart on it, and making our way to that door and destroying the heart, it opened a pathway which led to another boss gate similar to the one in town center. And the same thing happened this time where the gate opened and our imp entered into the boss room, but right after the gate closes, meaning there is no returning for us. And to start off, we're thrown into a pretty simple area where there's a train, and on the two sides of it there's wind blowing downwards, and this wind comes and goes, but if it catches us it pushes us all the way back. So realizing the pattern, I sprinted to an area where the wind couldn't catch us in between the trains, and then waited for the wind to happen right after jumping into this hole in the wall, eventually making it to this area where there was pretty heavy signs that we're about to run into Dreadwood. And jumping downwards, running through a tunnel, we see the battle arena, which was basically a swampy area with trees that were moving on the ground and then a big circular thing in the middle. And at first I kind of just wandered around the full swamp trying to see what there was, eventually seeing this white box with the red button on it that we activated, and this activation powered this wind launch pad which launched us all the way up to the circular arena. And for some reason this tree had a heart on the back of it, so of course, like any normal person, I shot at the heart, which transitioned into a cutscene. And in this cutscene we find out that this humongous tree in the middle was Dreadwood itself, and the only area you can deal damage to Dreadwood is its eyeball. And that wasn't the difficult part, but more so was that its attacks dealt an insane amount of damage, taking me down all the way to 10 health. So I decided to hide behind this pad and call in my mech. And the imp mech in this game is honestly insane because it just deals so much damage. It was able to just power through 1/5 of Dreadwood's health, which led to another phase of Dreadwood where we had to take out 3 of its hearts before we could deal any more damage. And what's cool in this game is that you can actually sprint with the mech as well, so you're not just stuck being slow all the time. But after taking out the last heart on Dreadwood, his health reappeared. And once again, using the imp's normal attack, we blitzed through Dreadwood's second fifth of health. But this time things were a little different because it stuck out these branches which spun in a circle, turning this into a game where we had to jump over the branches, otherwise we'd either take an insane amount of damage or just get completely knocked off the map. And getting knocked off the map is detrimental in this fight because now we have to fight Dreadroots that are on the bottom, and I actually ended up dying here, which reset a full 1/5 of Dreadwood's health back, which wasn't too bad. But for some reason, whenever it got to that stage where it started spinning its branches around, I for some reason just couldn't properly jump over them and kept falling off the arena. And this was actually where a pretty insane glitch happened, where I was getting extremely low on health with my mech, so I decided to jump out of it, but right as I jumped out, a Dreadwood hit me, I think completely defeating the mech, which I'm guessing made the game think that I was dead, so when the imp came out of the mech, it was invisible. And in this invisible phase, the Dreadroots and all the other plants would still attack me, but I wouldn't take any damage. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I took complete advantage of this, because it made it to where Dreadwood's attacks wouldn't deal any damage to me. And if you look to the left, there actually was something a little funny. My imp body was right there, but I wasn't actually there, but it mimicked all my movements. If I moved, it would move. If I shot, it would even do the shooting animations with me. So I thought maybe that was my main body and the plants had to attack it, but even when the plants attacked that body, I didn't take any damage. The only time that I would actually start taking damage was when I transformed into the mech again. So I thought that the glitch had reversed after I turned into the mech, but once I got out of it, I realized that the glitch had not reversed, and using this, it made the fight extremely easy. And eventually, after a pretty long fight, I was able to take out all of Dreadwood's health, defeating him, and he just started throwing up marshmallows everywhere. But with the marshmallows, out came Dummy, and going up to it, we had now rescued Dummy. With that, completing the entire main quest and defeating Dreadwood and returning Dummy to his cult leader position. Tim was also ecstatic because he could feel dumb again. But with that aside, we were now going back to the plant side. First talking to this acorn named Sir Victor, and then we get into this wagon that's driven by a bong choy, entering an interesting tunnel, which brings us to a place named Mount Steep, more specifically Old Town of Mount Steep. And this is where we're dropped off, and similarly to the Weirding Woods, we aren't dropped off in the mission hub and we have to make a journey there. Thankfully, this one was a lot less dangerous as there aren't just random trees trying to hunt you down, so we made it to this dandelion in Fort Roquefort pretty easily. But the dandelion seemed to be panicking, so I interacted with it to find out what was happening, which started the Parmageddon quest. And apparently in Mount Steep, they were having a problem where the cheese that was supposed to flow through a pipeline into town just stopped flowing. And of course, they assumed that it was the zombies that had something to do with it. And our mission is to find out what happened to the cheese flow. So first, using the chomper, we make our way over to the cheese pumping station. And you can see here that in this game, Chomper actually has a long-ranged attack, at the same time having its normal chomp attack. And it can seem a little weird, but honestly, in this game, it was needed just to kind of balance it out. Because otherwise, in multiplayer, the Chomper would be a little unusable compared to all the other strong characters that there are. But that aside, I was destroying all the zombies on my path to the cheese pumping station. And once we made it there, we ran into these flying robots. And thankfully, like I mentioned, the Chomper had its long-range attack, because otherwise, this would have been the worst character to choose for this mission. And eventually, I destroyed them all, then being directed to pick up some secret plans, which I was able to find in these weird boxes. And after getting the secret plans, we dashed back to Dandelion, but as soon as we were about to exit the mountainous area, we ran into a problem. The zombies had blocked the path off with some hard moldy cheese, but thankfully there were these things called mouseflies that love cheese that were right next to it, so they ate away at it, making a path for me to escape. But before I could even do that, there were some zombies that I was gonna have to destroy. And the flyers this time were a champion variant, so they had much more health and took longer to defeat. But eventually we made it through their health and started dashing all the way back to Dandelion. And once we made it there, we had completed the Parmageddon quest. And this was where our main mission started, because as the Dandelion was reading through the secret plans, it realized that the zombies were planning to cover all of Neighborville with super hot cheese. But the Dandelion had a plan in which first we needed to master the harmonica. And this harmonica's goal would be to direct mouseflies into a blockade that's once again blocking off the boss gate. So our first quest is... This quest starts with us talking to this pea shooter who has the sheet music but is unwilling to give it to us because we aren't worthy of it, and says that the sheet music is too powerful for us to have. And basically this quest is us proving to him that we're worthy of the sheet music. So I transform into a rose, making it to a fair that was happening. And in this fair we first have to do some target practice, which since the rose has homing, it ended up being pretty easy, and we reached our goal of 50 points with 20 seconds to spare. Afterwards we entered a pie eating contest against a Chomper, and this was basically just spamming F, and we kind of got decimated by the Chomper as it was eating multiple pies at once. But the pea shooter, who was named Tumbleweed Ted, respected that we still went up against him, and it worked out in our favor. And here Ted now wanted us to choose plants at the fair to help him out. So I first chose the oak, and then the snapdragon, and lastly the sunflower for healing. And I should explain, this team was being put together because there was a jail right by the mission hub in which a zombie named the Big Boy Gang Leader was about to invade, and Tumbleweed Ted with the crew that I'd collected were supposed to handle him. But then a tumbleweed storm started sweeping through, which ended up taking Tumbleweed Ted out of the picture by squashing him. But thankfully he was still alive and could communicate with us, telling us that now it was up to us to guide the plants and defend the jail. And this mission was similar to the one that we did in Town Center against Zen Sensei, but of course this time we had the support of 3 other plants, which made defending pretty easy. And at first the Big Boy Gang Leader was only sending in his underlings, but then realized that it wasn't working. So then he decided to come out himself, which then we transitioned into a cutscene where we see the Big Boy Gang Leader teleport in the distance, looking towards us in a menacing way, and then teleporting a couple more times, getting closer and closer each time. And everything seemed to be going well until a Gargantuar holding a gigantic bomb started making its way directly to the door, and I just couldn't deal enough damage to it because I was using the Rose, and Rose happens to be one of the lower damage dealers on the plant side. So that bomb ended up taking almost half of the jail door's health. And when the second Gargantuar came in, I was definitely regretting choosing the Rose because it seemed to be doing horrifically, but thankfully I was able to defeat this Gargantuar. But it wasn't over, as I looked behind and another Gargantuar with nearly full health was approaching the door and was already very close. But somehow we beat him just before he was about to make it there, which then led to a mini battle against the gang boss, but we dealt enough damage that he ran away and said that he'd be back. And for a few minutes things were peaceful as we only only had to go against these zombies, but then the gang boss started sending in foot soldiers combined with exploding imps, and this brought the door's health down to 1/3, and little by little the door's health kept on dwindling until everything went wrong and one of our crew members got taken out. At the same time, the door was destroyed, and then we transitioned into a cutscene where the door just exploded, flying outwards, and out of the door walked the big boy gang, consisting of a foot soldier, super brains, and electric slide, and of course the boss. And now we were tasked to defeat all of the members of the big boy gang, and the first zombie that I decided to battle from the gang was the super brains because it just made a beeline straight towards me, and this was pretty scary as the super brains was tanky and dealt a good amount of damage, but trying my best to keep my distance, I was able to defeat him eventually. And next I laid my sights on the electric slide because his health was already fairly low, and spamming my attack at it, it was taken out pretty quickly, leaving only 2 more, which one was the gang boss who was also very low in health and we were able to defeat. Now leaving just 1 more, which was the foot soldier camping up top, and the foot soldier wasn't really a threat because it kind of just got destroyed by my attack, and with that we had defeated all of the big boy gang. And Tumbleweed Ted started talking to us, telling me that the sheet music was ours, and at the same time crying but brushing it off as a tumbleweed allergy. But now the quest had been completed and we obtained the sheet music. And next up, this quest starts off with us talking to this nightcap named Gilly the Kid, who brags about being the quickest mushroom on the mesa, and apparently Gilly wanted to get the hat by himself, but Tumbleweed Ted told him it'd be too risky and didn't let him go. So now we're here as the sunflower trying to get the hat, and first we somehow have to open this electrified door, which we figure out is done by sabotaging 4 generators that were around the area. And after the last generator had been sabotaged, the electrified doors opened, and we made it to this underground area that had engineers and scientists running around. And these engineers and scientists were a little annoying because we're supposed to sabotage more generators, but these guys could repair them if damaged. So we had to make sure that we're being quick with it and didn't let them repair them, but of course at times I did fail in this, letting them repair, but then I quickly took out the generator again. And eventually, using my sunflower beam, I was able to destroy this last generator very quickly and almost dying, being left at 4 health, but thankfully the sunflower has a self-healing ability. And after healing up, I made it to this area where the grizzled hat was being kept, but apparently as we entered it was actually a trap, and what we had just stepped on was the lever to the trap, which launched cheese under the hat, which sent the hat flying into a pool of hot cheese, making it unobtainable. And not only did this trap do that, but it also sent the whole factory into trap mode, and the cheese in the area started rising, and Gilly the Kid told us to forget about the hat and just get out. And now we had to use these platforms and parkour all the way out in under 2 minutes. And I won't lie to y'all, I died here a couple of times after falling into the cheese, but eventually I got the hang of it and learned the right direction, as we're supposed to take this left turn right off the bat. And jumping across a couple more platforms, some that even had cheese that would push them upwards, and some that would even fall if you weren't quick enough, we had finally made it past the rising cheese. And we got a communication from Gilly the Kid telling us that the hat wasn't important and our soul was grizzled enough, which means that we'd completed this quest and gotten the grizzled hat experience, with the next step being the treasure hunt quest starts off with us talking to this cactus named Alice, and this treasure hunt is basically us trying to find a podcast that'll teach us how to play the harmonica. But then we go into a cutscene where Alice is about to hand us the treasure map, but the flying imps have their eyes on it, so they charge in straight to Alice, snatching the map. And then the imp with the map drops it onto the propeller fans of the other imps, and the map just gets torn to shreds. And that wasn't the end, as the imps now took a piece each and started just hiding in different places around the area. So now it was our goal to find all the imps and get all the pieces of the treasure map back. The first one was of course in this barrel, which exploded and the imp came out, and after defeating it we obtained the first piece of the map. I then found the second one in another blue barrel, but in fighting it and the foot soldier my health got extremely low, so I had to tactically retreat while dodging bullets at the same exact time, and after my health regenerated I went back, this time taking it a little more carefully and eventually getting the second map piece. And then on our path we take a little left, which leads us to this area, and this time the imps were instead in a haystack. And I say imps because after defeating this one and getting the third piece, we found the fourth one hiding in this haystack at the bottom, getting the fourth piece after defeating it. The fifth and sixth imps were very easy to find, but definitely the most annoying to defeat because they had an invincibility that was linked to the robo-zombie, and that basically meant that we'd have to defeat the robo-zombie and then we'd be able to deal damage to the imps. And being overwhelmed, I again had to to retreat because I was about to die, but then I made my way back and started sniping the robo zombie from a distance, finally defeating it with this shot, which then of course gave me the opportunity to deal damage to the imps. But after dealing a certain amount of damage, another robo zombie spawned, and we're gonna have to do the same exact thing once again. And this cycle actually repeated a couple of times until eventually we were able to get the 5th and finally the 6th pieces of the treasure map. And after getting these, we walked them back to Alice, who got straight to work trying to put them all together and was able to do it without the help of any glue. But apparently Alice is the only one that's able to read the map because her handwriting is terrible, so she has to guide us to the X. Which, making it down into this area where the spinning thing was, we sprinted and entered this gate at the last second, but once again ran into a parkour path, eventually making it past and reaching the X. And after digging up where the X was, we transitioned into a cutscene where a treasure chest appeared, but then right after, a Robo-Gargantuar appeared right underneath it. And now we had to defeat this Robo-Gargantuar in order to get the treasure chest. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of cheesed this mini boss by standing super far away and just sniping him. Even the Robo-Zombies you'd send in were pretty easy to defeat, and after a couple of minutes I was able to dwindle the Mecha Garg's health down, finally defeating it without much trouble at all. And with that, we had completed the treasure hunt, now unlocking the instructional podcast, which now allowed us to fight. And our path to fighting Major Problem first started off with a dandelion glazing us, but with us also now mastering the harmonica and obtaining the ability to guide the mouse flies all the way to the gate that was guarded by the moldy cheese. And for this fight, I decided to use the pea shooter, quickly making my way down to the mouse flies. And looking at the mouse flies, I played the harmonica and then fired the mouse flies directly at the gate, which sent them flying. And once they got there, they quickly ate through the moldy cheese, revealing the gate behind. But of course, this was only the beginning, as now we had to make it past the super hot cheese by platforming across. And the first jump was good, but the second jump was too ambitious, and I took a decent amount of damage from the hot cheese, but thankfully I landed on the platform afterwards. And on the next jumps, I decided to take it a little bit slower, eventually jumping on to the last platform and then making it to the boss gate. And now all that was left to do was enter. So like normal, the gate opened up and we entered, and the gate shut right behind us. And then we sprinted down this enormous tunnel, which eventually led to this insane crater in the ground, which seemed a little spooky, but eventually I jumped down. And this area was called Rock Bottom. And eventually, after a little bit of platforming, we made it to sort of a dead end, where I saw this flying imp who I defeated quickly, which then initiated a cutscene. And it seemed that a bunch of flying imps that we had taken out were all falling into the super hot cheese. And from the super hot cheese, out came a monstrosity, which was the boss we're going to fight, given the name Major Problem. And the only way we could deal damage to Major Problem was by shooting these light bulbs that would glow up around it. And in shooting them, I realized that the pea shooter might have been the perfect plant to choose for this boss fight, because I didn't really have to aim and could just shoot near the light bulbs and I'd deal damage. And if it happened to be that there was a bunch of light bulbs right next to each other, I'd be able to hit them all at once. But it seemed like Major Problem had gotten angry, because after dealing a certain amount of damage, he started heating the cheese and it started rising. And we're now forced to platform upwards using these rocks, eventually making it to this area where I stood around for a while shooting down flying imps. And then eventually the second wave of platforms appeared where I had to run even farther up, making it to this platform which was more center based, and there's a little rock in the middle that we couldn't get on top of, but I knew it was going to be a key part in dodging Major Problem's attacks, because as soon as he got back up from the cheese, he started spamming rockets at us. But again, we very easily damaged him back, and then he pulled out probably his scariest move, which was this flamethrower that we couldn't really do anything against and had to just stick behind this rock to dodge it. And the pea shooter was very good against the flying imps as well, because it could just two-shot him. And after taking out enough imps, Major Problem resurfaced, but out of nowhere started using the flamethrower again, where I took a little bit of damage but quickly hid behind the rock. And it got a little scary here because Major Problem was shooting at us, and at the same time there were flying imps to our right shooting at us. And I knew I was gonna have to take the imps out first, because if I didn't, I would never be able to regenerate my health, as they'd be constantly hitting me. So after defeating him, I was able to get back up to 125 health. And Major Problem once again dove into the cheese. But when he came up, he once again started heating the cheese and it started rising. So I was forced to platform upwards once again. And seeing the cheese rise was pretty crazy. And eventually I was forced on to this last platform where I knew the final battle was about to take place, because if the cheese was to rise any further, it would leave the volcano. And this platform got even scarier because out of nowhere, a drill started drilling it in half, and it wasn't just a half because it ended up drilling the platform into fourths, and then the platforms just started moving away from each other, and our only way to make it from platform to platform was by jumping over these rocks that would fall if we jumped on top of them. I knew this one was definitely going to be a little tough because one mistake with my jumping, it'd be GG's. And as soon as Major Problem resurfaced, I started sprinting from platform to platform because I knew he was just about to do an attack, and you can't really see it here, but he was performing an attack, so I kept on running until I finally heard the sound of the attack stop, so I turned around and started shooting at him. And then rockets started storming down on me, so I had to start running again, but they didn't last too long, so I was able to deal more damage. And jumping platform to platform, I was able to dodge most of the attacks, eventually dealing enough damage that Major Problem once again retreated, and I was forced to face these flying imps, which I took out very quickly. But then Major Problem came up again and started firing up his flamethrower, and he hit me once, which lit me on fire, dealing a little bit of damage, but it wasn't too much, and I just kept on evading until I heard it turn off, which then I turned around and started shooting at him. And then he made the mistake of having 4 light bulbs lit up right next to each other, which helped me deal a massive amount of damage. And then he went underground once again, which had me panicking a little bit, so I kept looking back and forth, but then he appeared on the left side and he started shooting rockets at me, but I saw my opportunity with a lit light bulb and his low health, so I started shooting at him, defeating Major Problem. And once I got to this next platform, I turned around and saw him sinking into the cheese, and he basically started overloading with all his light bulbs lighting up simultaneously, and it seemed like he was about to explode, but then all of the light bulbs ended up just breaking and he sank into the cheese once again. And with that, we had defeated Major Problem and completed the quest. And back in Old Town, Dandelion was calling us the coolest hero ever, but enough glaze because we have one more map left on the zombie side. And you might be familiar with this map because after talking to this zombie, this busbulets launches off and takes us to somewhere, with this somewhere being Pressure Pier in Town Center. Yep, we'd entered Town Center, but now on the zombie side. Oh, and also had a friend join me for this expedition. But now we talk to this scientist named Dr. Real Doctor, which initiates the infection detection quest. And Dr. Real Doctor basically explains to us that there's some sort of virus going around turning zombies back into normal civilians. So we follow a different scientist named Dr. Nurse Doctor to figure out the cause. And our first stop is listening to these carrots, which apparently only infect us with better eyesight, so we have to keep looking, following the nurse even further until eventually making it to this place that had toilet paper, and then we were tasked to eat toilet paper. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of lost the footage here, but after eating the toilet paper, we completed the quest, and Dr. Real Doctor started telling us about Blightcap and how she was a scary mushroom, but it was good for him because we had to fight him. But there was a problem because in order to fight Blightcap, we first had to assemble a stink bomb, and that's where the journey started, with our first quest being... This quest starts off with us talking to an electric slide named Power Cora, who basically tells us that we're going to be putting on a parade in order to distract the plants so we can steal this thing called the Ancient Fartifact. So we make it through the roads, grabbing the attention of the plants that we're seeking. And for this quest, I was using the engineer while Mr. Rusty Ninja made use of an electric slide, and honestly a pretty good combo because the engineer is able to take out the hordes of zombies and the electric slide can take out any of the tankier ones. And the parade got to a point where we weren't getting enough attention from the plants, so Cora asked us to put up 4 posters around the area so we could cause a bigger distraction. And at some parts there was just a million potato mines planted, so I almost ended up dying, surviving with 5 health. And it was hard to see them at first because it was kind of dark, but once we knew they were there, they were easy to spot because of the red glowing orb. And after putting up 2 posters, we were actually struggling getting up to the 3rd one because it just seemed too high up, so we thought we might have needed another zombie for it. But then we realized we could actually jump up here using a couple of obstacles and put the poster up. Now leaving the 4th and final one, which first when we got there was again a bunch of potato mines and we had to vanquish the plants around, but it was just a couple of weeds and cactuses, so we did so pretty easily, finally putting up the very last poster. And Power Cora relayed a message to us saying that the posters worked because plants were incoming, so we rushed back to the parade and started shooting down the plants, eventually defeating them all, making the parade move forward. And Power Cora said we're getting close to our destination and we just needed one final distraction of fireworks to lure out the last guards. So I ran back to the trolley with the fireworks, setting them off, which immediately spawned in more plants that were in a line, so my engineer's attack was able to take them all out pretty easily, and Mr. Ninja took out the plants from the other side. And now we're leading the parade to the final destination, where once we got there, a cutscene initiated, zooming in to the Ancient Fartifact. But of course, like normal, whenever a good thing's about to happen, a bad thing appears in a dangerous place, which in this case was a spooky squash. And with 2 people, it was actually pretty easy to defeat him, and his health dwindled extremely quickly, which gave us the freedom to enter the museum. And entering it together, we went up to the artifact and stole it, which Cora loaded up onto the trolley, and then it quickly boosted away to a different location. So of course we ran after it, escorting Cora, and once we got to it, we had to defend it from the oncoming plants. And after successfully defending it, we had the option to unlock it, which of course we did, initiating the last cutscene of this quest, in which the artifact opens up and stinks up the place. But this stink ended up being a lot bigger than we imagined because it blew up, making a mushroom cloud. But that was actually our goal, because now we'd completed the Parade Gloat quest, with next step being this was Brick, an 80s action hero who got beat up by a plant named Brian, and we have to defeat Brian in order to get the detonator for the stink bomb. And first, of course, we had to find Brian. But while we make our way over there, I should mention that me and Mr. Ninja both decided to use the Space Cadet for this one, because if we needed to, we could team up and combine into a singular space station. But as we had now found Brian, this wasn't needed yet. And Brian ended up being this ginormous pickle who said that if we wanted to revenge, we would need to throw some insults at him. And I chose the Annihilate option, which ended up being "you jerky jerk." And Mr. Ninja thought I was talking to him, so he replied with "no, you are." Brian was definitely right to think that our insults weren't cool, so he disappeared into the ground, leaving us to defeat what the game calls Brian's cronies, which were just a couple of plants. But then we again had to go and find Brian. And first, we're tasked to pick up this mint and throw it in the soda to make it explode, just out of spite. And after following the trail of more mints and running into a couple of problematic plants, we ran into this chomper that ended up eating one of the mint wrappers, so we had to start chasing it because otherwise we would have lost Brian's trail. And so after defeating that chomper, we were sent another crony of Brian's, which ended up being a champion Snapdragon, a pretty devastating opponent, but Mr. Ninja was able to defeat him, which then we caught Brian's trail again and followed the mints up Pressure Pier all the way to the top, which initiated a cutscene, and Brian appeared from the ground, initiating another insult battle. And this time I hit him with the "go back to the club sandwich you crawled off of," and Mr. Ninja Control-C, Control-V'd my insult. But this double up of insults ended up hurting Brian, and feeling salty, Brian ended up starting a fight. And Brian was a pretty formidable opponent because if he got too close and used his attacks, he did a ton of damage. We're just lucky that we had the space stations with a pretty decent amount of health, and Brian had these phases within the battle where he'd go invincible and we'd have to arm soda traps and then lead him into the soda traps to take off Brian's invincibility. And this wasn't too big of a deal, but it became a little problematic when we had the soda trap armed, but Brian bugged out and wasn't following us. And for a couple of minutes we tried everything like shooting at him, but he just kept running back and forth in emptiness. But then eventually, after 3 full minutes, Brian ended up making it to the lure trap, and we were very thankful because otherwise we would have had to restart. And afterwards, this battle became pretty easy because Brian stopped glitching out, and we were eventually able to do enough damage to him, which initiated a cutscene. And in the cutscene, Brian started going crazy, deforming into this weird monster where he just exploded, leaving us with a cool cinematic as we're floating away. And with that, we had completed this quest and gotten the detonator from Brian. And next up, and for this quest, we first talk to this foot soldier who goes by the name Norm Elguy. And basically, he's gonna guide us to where we can retrieve the final item to make the stink bomb, which is a balloon. But this balloon happens to be stuck at the top of this area, which this cutscene shows us walnuts falling down from. So we make it past the plants, dodging as many walnuts as possible, at some points having to stop to take out some more plants. And then there's some areas like the small tunnel where you can just shoot the walnuts to get through, because otherwise they kind of just block it off. And eventually, going through this windy road, we made it to the top where we now had to destroy 4 walnut cannons. Oh, and I forgot to mention that I chose to use the All-Star for this mission, and Mr. Ninja chose to use the 80s action hero. Both very solid choices, as they're kind of just all-rounders that can deal with anything. And eventually, using our broken characters, we made it up to the roof of the shop where we had to destroy the final walnut cannon and then light up these fireworks because the balloon was stuck above us. And these fireworks were lit to guide the other zombies that were coming up the hill with us and show them where the balloon was stuck so they could start throwing rocks at it to get it unstuck. And our mission here was to defend them while they're doing their job, which eventually we completed the mission, but then the balloon got unstuck from the tower and ended up flying right underneath this tree. And like usual, a boss spawned out of nowhere, which in this case was the Torchwood. And we had some pretty heavy damage dealers with my abilities dealing a ton of damage, and combining that with the 80s action hero's abilities, we ended up defeating the Giga Torchwood in like 30 seconds, allowing allowing us to shake the tree and collect the balloon, meaning that we'd completed the final quest and now we'd be going up against Dr. Real Doctor says Eureka, saying that we got all the parts for the stink bomb, which allowed us to assemble the stink bomb. And so then he shows us where we could fire it from and then where we needed to fire it to open the boss gate. And I knew I was going to have to use a powerhouse for this mission, so I ended up using the 80s action hero, while Mr. Ninja went with the imp and imp mech, very heavy hitters. And making it to the launcher, I fired the stink bomb, which had a guided missile effect where I could control it, controlling it all the way to the boss gate, taking out the mushrooms guarding it. And so we made our way over to the boss gate and then ran inside like normal, and the boss gate did its job and closed on us. And we had a bit of a windy road to walk up to get to the boss. And on this walk, Dr. Real Doctor told us that he airdropped us a medical grade bomb launcher to help us. And we didn't really know what this meant at the time, but once we approached the battle arena, we saw it right in front of us. And this arena was the source of the thing that was transforming all the zombies into civilians. And using the bomb launcher, we fired a stink bomb at the fungus pile in the middle, but that didn't do enough, so now we had to grab some garbage from around the area and throw it into the launcher and then stand in the circle to supercharge it, which after it was supercharged, we could launch the stink bomb once again. And this time, after hitting the fungus pile, it initiated a cutscene where a big mushroom head appeared from the ground and then seconds later completely came out of the ground, revealing Blightcap, a pretty threatening looking enemy. So of course we went straight to fighting it, and it has this semi-fire effect where if it hits you, it deals damage over time, delaying your healing. So we knew that we'd have to be careful from that. And thankfully for me, it started targeting Mr. Ninja and did so for pretty much the rest of the battle. But as we got his health down a fourth, it started doing this weird animation that sent us back to our launcher. And we once again had to collect garbage from around the area, throw it into the launcher, and supercharge the stink bomb, but this time with the threat of the Blightcap right next to us. And I got pretty low on health a couple of times, but thankfully I was able to make it through, and we took away the Blightcap's invincibility by hitting it with another stink bomb. But then as we took down another third of his health, it turned invincible again. So we had to do the same exact process of collecting the garbage and firing the stink bombs, but when I fired it, I didn't realize where it was and had to guide it around to hit it. And thankfully this was the last time that we're going to have to use the stink bomb, and now it was just a war until whoever died first. And of course with our overpowered characters, our chances were looking pretty good. And eventually as it was spawning in some doom shrooms, we were able to defeat Blightcap. And with that, we had completed the entire mission and saved the zombies from turning into civilians. And this also meant that we had now beaten all the bosses on all 4 maps. And as the video is coming to an end, let me know down in the comments who your favorite boss was. Mine was definitely a major problem. There was just something about the scenery and the entire fight that I really liked. But that was everything, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Okay, bye bye.